Stephen Miller was interviewed on CNN recently, and during the course of that interview he did the kind of thing that he often does, which was insult the host, essentially sort of reel off a screed of rage that seems to be an endless volume of bile within him that he started to spout out. Now, one of the key characteristics of Stephen Miller is that he does contain a lot of anger. And most of the time, almost all of his media appearances are ones in which essentially it's just an endless stream of anger coming from his mouth. And it seems to be almost continuous. There seems to be no interruption to that. Now, what I'm going to show you in this video is something a bit different, because something seems to have happened during one of the interviews that totally turned this process of the sort of diatribe on its head, brought the whole thing to a standstill. So during the interview, as I say, he was doing what he normally does, which is sort of attack the host and reel off a whole screed of anger. Now, at one point during the interview, however, suddenly, almost like a robot being, having the off button pressed, this happened.
The administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority.
Stephen? Stephen? Hey, Stephen, can you hear me?
So what was going on there? He seemed to be mute. It seemed like the words had got stuck in his throat and he wasn't able to say any more. See, this is very interesting because it helps us learn something deep down inside about the psychology of Stephen Miller, and more broadly about the psychology of MAGA still, because he's actually quite a close representative of MAGA. His heart beats to the pulse of MAGA almost like nobody else. So we can learn something about that whole movement as well as this person from this particular moment. You see, the thing that is very consistent from Stephen Miller is that he verbalizes a constant stream of hate towards migrants. That's a pretty consistent picture about him. In fact, other Senate staffers, he used to be a Senate staffer to Jeff Sessions, who was the senator at the time, and other Senate staffers knew Stephen Miller as the one guy who had a constant bee in his bonnet, a constant sort of angry set of policies about immigration. That was his hobby horse, that was his obsession, and he seemed to be able to think about little else other than his hatred, essentially, of migrants. Now, what seems to be the case is that it's actually often the case that people who have hatred towards migrants are just the most convenient scapegoat for the volcano of rage that they have within. The truth is that if migrants had all disappeared, they'll end up pointing that rage at others. The issue is not the subject of the rage, the issue is them. The rage comes from times past, during childhood, unresolved angers and traumas that exist within the body that they are unable to engage in any introspection or any self-awareness around, and so they have to throw it to the outside world and spew this rage against other people. Often they're projecting parts of themselves onto those other people. And so in the end, they will always need a subject for that rage. Now, immigrants is a convenient subject, so they lash out onto them. And of course, over time, the number of migrants who they attack, the number of people of a different colour who they attack will become larger and larger. It becomes illegal immigrants who are criminals, which was his original policy. Now it's just any illegal immigrant, even if they're working hard, even if they're engaging with society, then it becomes, generally even people who are American citizens, and then it becomes anybody who's a different skin colour. So, that rage is likely to incorporate more and more people. Now, what this particular a slip shows us, this sudden muteness shows us, is where his rage ultimately gets to. And where it gets to is ultimately against the entire population of America. Because that's the thing that he actually said by accident. He said the quiet part out loud. What I mean by that is, you see, the MAGA universe fundamentally has a bottom line, which is that they do actually want to destroy democracy. They're perfectly comfortable with converting the country from a democracy to a dictatorship, because the dictator will be the one who will end up being able to persecute everybody, because they're not answerable or accountable to anybody. They don't care about public opinion. They don't care about doing things that are popular or unpopular. They don't care about serving the people. They care only about victimizing others. And so this rage that they have is best sort of exercised by creating a dictatorship that enables them to find enemies everywhere and attack anybody and everybody they want. So the sort of hidden agenda for Stephen Miller and for MAGA is actually to create a dictatorship. That's really what they're after. You know, one of the philosophers who is a sort of philosopher king, who's the sort of ultimate thinker behind MAGA, is Curtis Yarvin. And the thing about this guy is that he has consistently talked about the importance of turning America into a monarchy, into a dictatorship, having a national CEO instead of a president who has to be accountable to the people. And so that is what their underlying philosophy is. That is where that state of rage eventually takes you. In other words, against everybody, not just against migrants, not just against some sections of society, not just against gay people or women, but eventually against everybody. And the only way to be against everybody is to be a dictator, part of a dictatorship. And that is what Stephen Miller revealed in this comment by accident, before quickly stopping himself and becoming mute, was unable to speak further because he realized he'd said too much. Because what he talked about is the idea that the president has plenary powers.
Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority.
And that's when he stopped himself, because you see, what plenary powers mean is total and absolute unchecked power. That is what he wants. That is what he wants this administration to effect. That is not constitutional. It is not part of any governing system in any Western democracy. No politician has plenary power. In other words, untrammeled, total power, totalitarianism. But that is what he has effectively articulated. It's like saying, yes, the system we're in is one of totalitarianism. Donald Trump is your dictator. That's effectively what he said in those words. And as soon as he said it, he suddenly realized that he'd said the quiet part out loud. And he stopped himself. The secret was out of the bag. But that is what he's always wanted. That is what this is about. The persecution of migrants is only stage one. That is what MAGA is fundamentally about. And it's really important, as I often say in these videos, for us to know what we're up against, for us to know the size of the challenge, for us to understand what it is we're actually facing. It is a movement to deliberately and determinedly dismantle democracy brick by brick. That's exactly what's going on. And that's what, for the first time, in plain terms, a senior advisor to the president has articulated without equivocation. I hope you like my video. As a psychiatrist who loves politics and economics and philosophy, I love to make videos like this, and you can really help promote this video to other people and get it on your feed more by liking and commenting and subscribing to the video as well. We have a wonderful community of people here who comment and support each other through this very traumatic period of world history that we're going through right now. I also hope you consider becoming a subscriber to the channel and also subscribing to my e-newsletter. There's a link in the description, and that way we can stay in touch outside the channel, so you can keep abreast of all of the content that I'm making on an ongoing basis. The latest of which actually is my latest book called We the People. Very, very proud of this book. It's actually a novel, a fiction book written by myself and the famous award-winning author T.J. McGregor. Together we wrote a book about what the future might look like. Bit of a dystopian novel, but what might happen if autocracy goes to its next stage, AI predicting the potential end of humanity. I actually made a video about that, it really happened. And how things might pan out in this dystopian world, and actually how a band of committed, passionate, progressive people managed to change the trajectory, and not in the way that you think. It's not just by running a candidate and opposing the autocrat, but actually by deepening the democracy that we have and engaging in a real participatory form of democracy that sort of shifts the needle and gets us back to basics and helps us sort of rebuild our democracy. And that's within the context of a really compelling, gripping story, a bunch of fascinating characters, and I assure you, you will not be able to sort of stop turning the page until you get to the end of the book. That's what all the reviewers have said so far. Lots of people love it, and I hope you can get it. You can get it on Amazon, any of the global Amazon bookstores out there. Please do order your copy of We the People. Just put We the People Russell Razak and you'll be able to find it inside Amazon as well. Also, I hope you consider becoming a member of the channel. You can subscribe to a couple of different membership levels. All members of the channel also get some free ebooks that I produce once a month. You can buy those ebooks too from russellsbooks.com. That's russellsbooks.com, and every month I produce a new ebook on that channel, which is really about, these are the non-fiction books I produce with my team, which is really about how to learn about the world around us and the psychologies of the people who govern us, but also how to learn about ourselves, deepen our own self-awareness in a way that helps us navigate this difficult world we're in right now. So those are sort of self-help books that are produced every month, and if you're a member of the channel, you get a sort of 100% discount on those books every month. Otherwise, you can go to russellsbooks.com, as I say, and buy them anytime you like. I really hope you can become a part of this community, as I say. So this sort of supportive community, validating and helping each other, is really worth being a part of, and I hope you can join us as we all join forces to create a better tomorrow together. Thank you.